All right, I'm going to jump in with the library news so we can go ahead and get started with the panel. I want to thank you, of course, all for joining us tonight. And this is part of our More Than a Month celebration. We love the mystery writers almost as much as you do. So we appreciate you spending your Wednesday night with us. The library would like to acknowledge that we occupy the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. We recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland. As uninvited guests, we affirm their sovereign rights as First Peoples and wish to pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Ramaytush community. And you will see in the chat box a link to some reading lists that we created, as well as websites and great resources to learn more about Bay Area First Peoples and some great places you could donate to. And so this is part of our More Than a Month celebration, what I already mentioned, and that's the library's version of Black History Month, which we start at MLK weekend and run it all through February, and we've had an amazing lineup. So I definitely encourage you to search our YouTube page, which has a lot of the events recorded there. Upcoming, we have, and I'll just mention that this year's national theme for Black History Month is Black Health and Black Wellness. So we really embrace that. And you can see the beautiful artwork by Tiffany Conway. We're so fortunate to be able to work with an artist who created that work specifically for us. If you go to the main library, you will see this thing just donning the entire side of the building. It's amazing to see it huge. And you can catch her doing an artist spotlight on our YouTube channel. Next Tuesday, we have for On the Same Page, which is San Francisco Public Library's bi-monthly read, celebrating the amazing Jessamine Stanley. This book is available at all our branches right now. You can walk in and pick one up off the shelf. You can see I loved it. I am going to be a total fangirl on this night. And she will be in conversation with Tamika Caston Miller. So Tuesday, 7 p.m. Don't miss it. The amazing Dennis Phillips is hosting meditation every Wednesday in our African American Center. Dennis Phillips is a long-time library patron. We love him dearly, but he can also be seen in Netflix Crip Camps. He's an activist and just a leader. So please come check him out. He does meditation. We're trying to figure out how we can keep him every Wednesday. This Sunday, again, in person. Yes, these are in person. We're gathering. Wear that mask though. And we'll space out, but it's time to get back together, friends. So we'll have artist Ramakant Oristers, who is going to be leading a crochet jam. And this is really all about community, wellness, being together, and get in that zone of doing a craft. So come by Sunday. It's a good day at the library, the main library, because it's also the heart of the city farmers market right across the street. And every Thursday, we are hosting our Thursday at Noon film series, and we're featuring High on the Hog, How African American Cuisine Transformed America. And then one last author talk coming up next week. Charlie Jane Anders, SF icon, will be in combo with Heather Knight and Peter Hartlaub of the SF Chronicle, Total SF, in person, Correct Auditorium, or streaming if you're not ready to come out. The Correct is very spacious, so there's a lot of room. Everyone will still be masked. It's still a requirement at our library. So come check that out. Charlie Jane is a total leader, and she's been running a long time author talk called Writers with Drinks, and that is also picking back up. And she's a total advocate of authors and bookstores, so come check it out. And of course, we could not do any of this without our friends at the San Francisco Public Library, who we thank very much for supporting all that we do. All right, I'm almost done talking. Yay. I'm super excited about tonight. We love doing the mystery panels because you all love it, and it's so great to have a turnout for this. And we do this with all of our campaigns. It's been now going on quite a while. We've pulled together these panels, and the crime writers come out and the crime lovers come out. So tonight we're going to see who is on our panel. We are missing a few people due to just some ER emergencies, and so we're going to cross our fingers. But we have in the house, Tracy Clark, Delia Pitts, and Faye Snowden. And they are featured in Midnight Hour. And this is a chilling anthology. So without further ado, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And, you know, they're also, their bios are in that doc, and they definitely are some brilliant, brilliant women. All right. And I see a hand raised. We'll have some time for Q&A towards the end. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to the panel.
All right, great. Well, Delia, I see that you are the first in my Brady Bunch screen. So do you want to go ahead and go first?
Sure, happy to. First, let me say a big thank you to San Francisco Public Library for sponsoring this panel. It was great that you brought us all together in this way, and that you brought so many fans and readers of mystery stories and gave us all an opportunity to talk with them. So thank you very much, San Francisco Public Library. My name is Delia Pitts, and I'm very honored to be here with two great mystery writers today. I was also honored to have a short story included in the anthology that we're basing our panel on today, Midnight Hour. And we'll, I think, discuss probably each of our stories a little bit more. But I did want to mention that in addition to the short story writing that I've enjoyed, I also have a mystery series of novels. This is a series of novels that's contemporary, they're noir, they're private eye, they're set in Harlem, and I invite you all to take a look when you get a chance.
Tracy, do you want to? Okay. My name is Faye Snowden, and I also want to thank the San Francisco Public Library for having me. It's a great event. Love talking about writing. We'll do it any chance that I get, so this is wonderful. I have a story in Midnight Hour, a little story called Chefs. I'm also a writer of a dark Southern Gothic fiction, very, very dark. And I have a series out right now called A Killing Fire. And the first book in that series, A Killing Fire, was published, I believe, in 2019. But some exciting news, I have a new sequel in that series that's coming out in June 2022. I'm also trying my hand at short stories. So I have a few short stories and other anthologies, and I also have one coming out in the Low Down Dirty Vote anthology, and I believe that's coming out July 4th. So again, thank you. Tracy?
Same here. Glad to be here with these talented ladies. I've got Lucky 13. That's my entry into the Midnight Hour anthology. And when I'm not writing short stories and tearing my hair out, I write a PI series set in Chicago, featuring an African-American female PI by the name of Cass Rains. There are 4 books in the series so far, and I'm pretty excited about it. So let's get talking.
Yeah. So I have a question. That demands answers. No. So my question is, we've all written novels, but and this is a question I've been thinking about, because short stories, just like screenplays a few years ago, used to scare the crap out of me. I was like, I can't do it. I'm still scared of screenplays, but I'm not so frightened of short stories nowadays. I think I can pull one off, well, a few off. But I have to ask you guys, what do you think are the biggest differences and challenges of writing a short story versus writing a longer work?
Well, I can say that the two forms are quite different. It's not like just taking your novel and chopping it off at the knees and it becomes a short story. You have to think about the structure in a very different way. You have to think about the language and the presentation and the punch that you need to bring to a short story in a way that you have room to develop in a novel, I'd say. You still want to get that first chapter in a novel. You want to get that first paragraph and that first line in to grab the reader's attention, of course. But you don't have to deliver as much information, I think, in that first chapter of a novel as you would in a short story. I remember when I wrote this story that's in Midnight Hour called Midnight Confidential, and I wanted instantly, it's written in the first person. And I think the first sentence I have, the person, the speaker say is that she hitched her bra strap into the groove on her shoulder. I did that largely because I wanted it to be known instantly, obviously, that this was a woman. And I didn't want, since I was writing first person, I didn't want to mess around with that fundamental fact. And then very quickly I got, maybe within 3 sentences, got the fact in that she was African American. I felt the need to move that along in a way that if I was writing a story, I mean, a novel, it might have gone on for a couple of paragraphs before those things became crystal clear.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's what makes short stories so difficult. I mean, you have to do 90,000 words of information and arc and all the rest of that in 5,000 words. So the panic sort of sets in right away for me. This was only my second short story, so I wasn't really that familiar or that comfortable with the format. So after the panic sort of died down a little bit, and I sort of eased into the story. The same elements are there. You just have to be quicker, as Delia said, in getting to your point. And you have to have all of those interesting craft elements in there, but you have to sort of condense them and get to the thing faster. So it takes a skill, a talent. Those who do it well, I applaud them. But for the long formers, like our novel writers, it's sort of an exercise. It really is something that you really have to focus on and concentrate on.
Yeah, and it is. It's and then I just like the fact that you need to be able to convey a lot of, like you guys said, a lot of information in a very short time span and in very few words. And I like images, right? Instead of saying that, just kind of spelling it out. I like to put this image out there and have the reader kind of understand, like the bra strap. I read that the bra strap, moving up the bra strap.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, and that says so much, right? So I kind of like that, like doing those in short stories. And the other part that I like is I like the fact, I like to cut, right? And I know that's a lot of people say, oh my goodness, I hate having to cut so much out. But sometimes when you cut words and images, you just end up with a very sharp story that moves rather quickly, is what I like about it. I just see it when I write a short story, I roam around the house sighing, my head to my forehead, oh my goodness. And then I have a clipboard and some scratch paper. But then when I get to writing, it's like I'll write like 5,000 to 7,000 words. But that short story, when it ends, may just be 1,000, 1,500, most, I think, like 2,000 words. So I kind of like sculpting. I always wanted to be a visual artist or a sculptor, which I have no talent at. But to me, it's almost like taking all those words or that stone and finding the gold or the gem within it. So, yeah.
How did you all work in setting into those very few words that we have allotted to us in a short story? I found that very tough. The weather, the place, the time, even the time frame. Is this now, or is this a decade ago, or is this a century ago? How did you work with those questions of setting?
I think you have to really get specific about what words you use. I think it's all in word usage. I described the setting of this story as he lives in the raggedy house on a raggedy block. I mean, everybody can sort of put in their mind what an image of that would be. That saves me a lot of word right there. I don't have to go beyond that. So I think it's sort of selecting the right word in the right place to sort of save yourself a lot of real estate. So that takes also a lot of time to sort of find the right word, put it in the right place, invoke an image so that you don't have to actually put it on the page. So again, it takes a lot of skill for somebody to sort of do that. I applaud the people who do it well.
Mm-hmm. I think there is also a little bit of trusting your reader, right? When I first started writing, I thought that, I know Natalie Goldberg in her book, Writing Down the Bones, I believe that was it, or maybe it was Annie Lamott or Anne Lamott, but she talked about marrying the fly, right? When I first started writing, I wanted to describe, if somebody was holding a glass cup, I thought I had to describe the cup in wicked detail, you know, the little bubbles of water, the condensation, and people would say, oh my gosh, the description. Some people loved it, but a lot of readers, especially today with the attention span, they're not too much into that. So you want to just say she held a glass of water and then trust the reader to kind of picture that in their head. How I chose my settings is, I was telling somebody else this, is that usually setting doesn't come to me first, it's the voice. It's like somebody who kind of, you guys gonna think I am a little bit, but I'll just start hearing this voice and seeing this person with a problem in my head, and the person just starts getting so insistent that I have to kind of get that out on paper. And this person was the person that's in the short story named Chefs. Johnny is actually a vet, but he's also an older man who's kind of coming to terms with being middle-aged, who's dating this younger woman. And so I saw him first, and then I'm a commuter. I live in the Bay Area, so I used to have to drive to work every day. And it was a journey that a lot of people don't like their commutes. I still love my commute, but because it was a way to wind down after work, and you got to see, you know, the what was going on outside, and I listened to audiobooks. But I've always been fascinated by that drive from the Bay Area, when you're going down the 99, then you get on the 120 to Modesto, where I live, and then you see all the fields that are out there. And I just remember seeing this pumpkin field that was, all the pumpkins were all smashed up. It was toward the end of the season or whatever. And that's how I chose my setting. And then his journey continues, and they drive down the 120, and then the 120, then the 99, gets off on Kiernan, shoots down Kiernan, where there were several abandoned houses that have always fascinated me. And that's how I was able to come up with a setting for that story.
Interesting. I found that it helped me in my story, Midnight Confidential, to be very, very confined. The whole story takes place in the single interrogation room in a police precinct. There's some, of course, the character, the voice, the narrator talks a bit about her life and how her career and how she got to this point. But essentially, she's just bringing us into that interrogation room. So I found that it helped me keep the pace, but also keep the descriptions to a minimum by literally confining all the characters to a single room. The person she's interviewing comes in, and then her lieutenant she's aware, is looking through the one-way mirror over her shoulder. And then there's a young cop who's acting as sort of a guard in the room. And so she's talking about all these different people, but it's literally within 4 square walls. And I found that helpful. I found it easier to make it into a short story and stop being a novel.
I kind of did the same thing. It takes place in a house. Okay, 4 walls, 1 door, a couple of windows. Easier for me because I don't have to describe a whole lot of stuff. And it's very much a 2-person sort of a deal, sort of a back and forth, sort of a tennis match. So that's easier for me because characters is where my head is usually at most of the time. I love characters. I love the interplay between characters. So this is sort of a 2-person match taking place in this one little house. So easier, 5,000 words, very containable, very doable.
Okay, I've got to ask that question: pantser or plotter? And is that a relevant distinction in a short story? We can maybe talk about it in novels as well. Maybe we ought to explain what pantsers are. The distinction is maybe a distinction without a meaning, but essentially pantsers are writers who go at their short stories by the seat of their pants. And then the plotters are people who plot, not plotting, but plotting their story with a number of varying degrees of specificity as they outline the progress that they want to bring their characters through to the end. So pantsers versus plotters, ladies.
Pantser, and I think you're a pantser, whatever format you're in. It's just the way our brains work. I think short stories would probably be easier for outliners because it's very easy to sort of set the thing out so you know where you're going. And then the rest of us sort of ping pong our way around and try to find a story and an idea and characters and stuff like that, by the seat of our pants. But I think it's more difficult for pantsers to write short stories. And that's just my opinion. I've only written two, but I'm thinking that's probably the case.
Yeah, two fine ones, right? And then one was not
Yeah.
the Lucky 13.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is so interesting. When I'm writing my novels, I start with my characters, so I define all my folks, and then and it's a mystery novel, right? So I feel like I have to have a really good understanding of the crime up front, and then sometimes I define my characters so well, and that I fall in love with my murderer, so I don't want them to be the killer, and that's when I kind of try to pants it off.
Pants it off.
Yeah, I try to
Pants it off.
I'm gonna make her innocent. So what I do is I describe my murder and I figure out I know who did it when I'm starting the book, and then after that I kind of write the bones, like the scaffolding, and then when I'm writing I put flesh on the bones, but I'm never like totally I don't adhere to my scaffolding originally, right? I'll go off and do some other things. For short stories, I think it requires, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I think it requires a little bit more discipline, right? Because so I'll start with, I love Natalie Goldberg writing down the bones and all that, and like free writing. And I think it's important, I start with the free writing, I get some first lines out and some images. But then once I get a good story going, I will do beginning, middle, end, and I'll have that kind of all kind of chunked out, and then I write to make sure that it fits within that structure, so I'll have that arc.
Now, Tracy, I thought you were going to use your image that I've heard you used before, throwing spaghetti against the wall.
That's what I do.
And
That's it. That is it. I mean, I come up with an idea of what I think the story is going to be about, and I try it out a little bit. If it doesn't work, then I start again and try something else. That's exactly it. I have no idea where I'm going when I sit down at my writing desk. I might have a glimmer of an idea of what I think the story will be and who the characters will be. And then halfway through whatever session that is, that might change 5 times. So I have no idea. Whatever I come up with, that's what I come up with. And then
I find that in my short stories, and I've written a number of them in a variety of genres. I started out writing fan fiction and have written more than 60 stories, short, varying from 500-word flash fiction to sort of novellas or novelettes that are 10 and 12,000 words. So I've written a lot of different kinds of short stories, but I found, particularly with the shorter end of the short story spectrum, that if I thought of the character's voice, as you were saying, Faye, but then if I thought about an inflection point in that character's life, in that character's career or story as they move through their lives, if I could pick that moment and maybe the immediate frame around that inflection moment, that was a way to confine the story. Again, I'm always looking for a way to make it short as opposed to making it a novel. And if I found a turning point, a point from which that character couldn't go back, a point that made that character different from what she was when we started the story to when we end the story, and I kept it as close around that point, then I found that I had some success in making it a short story, but making it a powerful story, I hope.
Yeah, and I love that, and sometimes listening to you, I was thinking about, you know, what I was saying, like, you know, I wait for the voice to come to me, and then I decide, and they talk, but it's not all that mysterious, right? I mean, and if I were to back up, and after I'm listening to you and thinking about it, it's a lot about I think craft, and also about intention, right?
Mhm.
So when I do short stories, I do start with a subject I want to write about. And lately, because you know, the genres that we write in sometimes have these rules that kind of keep you a little bit kind of roped in a little bit. I mean, there's some room from transgression, and in my novels, I might break all kind of genre rules. But in a short story, I feel that there's just a little bit more freedom, right? So what I wanted to do was to take these incidents of little known Black history moments that I think people should know about, but they don't. And that's the subject matter. I try to build a short story around that subject matter. And then I look for, you know, the character, and I try lines on and off, you know, first line, last lines, and situations. So it is a little bit about intention and craft as well, I think. Yeah.
I have no intention. I mean,
Yep.
I just,
Yeah,
Don't believe you.
no purpose.
no, I don't. Lucky 13 came about because I saw an old man carrying his groceries on the sidewalk. And that's how my story starts. Because now I'm starting to wonder, where is this old man going? Why is he carrying his groceries? He's kind of old. Who's waiting for him at home, if anybody? And that's where my story started. Now I just sort of took that little image of that little old man, and then I sort of sat down because Abby was waiting for this short story to be written, and I started. And then I'm wondering what this person is, who this person is, what is his life like, and then the twist comes because now I'm wondering, well, what's happened in this guy's life that could be sort of interesting and sort of flippy and kinky. And that's where it starts. Then you sort of build. It's kind of like building a Lego house, one brick at a time. You've got your character, you've got your setting, this one little house, and the interesting guy you're wondering about his life. And then you just sort of write. And that's how Panthers do it. And just because that's how our brains work. I mean, I wish I could sort of sit down like the geniuses that sort of outline everything and have character descriptions, and they know what shoe size their character wears and what color their favorite. They know all of that information before they start their writing. And I don't. I have, to this day, I could not tell you what size shoe Cass Rains wears. I don't care. I don't think readers care. She is who she is. What's interesting about her is what's inside of her. What she wears and how she wears it. I don't think anybody, gives that much care about. I don't. So I don't write it. So, but yeah, so the ideas sort of start where they start, and they lead you where they lead you. And one writing session might be great. You might just sort of tear through 1,000 words at once. The next day you come back, and half of those you have to tear up, and you only write 20 for that day. So that's how Panthers sort of go. It's just a stressful, sort of a tense-filled sort of a way of doing it, but that's the kind of brain that we have.
Yeah, as a Capricorn, that makes me itch.
Really?
I have to have some plan, some direction.
No, that makes me itch.
Capricorn here too. Capricorn too.
Yeah.
Because in my brain, if I have to write it all out like that, like an outline, my brain says, "Hey, you've written your story, you're done, and you haven't even started."
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. No, that's true.
Yeah, and when you were talking, Tracy, I was thinking about you're almost as curious as the reader. So yes. You start from a point of curiosity, and I can imagine how that, passion to know what this little old man carrying his groceries are like for you, and you could put that in the story. And then when a reader sits down, they're wondering the same thing. So you almost have this like synergy with your readers being a pantser, but I couldn't do it.
And I agree. I've sat down to write a story thinking I know who the killer is and who gets killed, and it changes. I might find a more interesting way of telling that story, and the killer might change, the victim might change. So all of that is sort of up in the air, and I just have to sort of see where it goes and what feels comfortable, what has a rhythm and a vibe to it. I might write 500 words and, have to throw all that out because I found a more interesting way of doing it. So, it's kind of fun. It's kind of stressful, but you Capricorns are weird. I mean,
Well, although I agree with, I am a Capricorn, December 31st, but I also agree.
Okay.
Yeah,
shut
the
up.
whole world is celebrating. Exactly.
And they wait for it to be over, right?
Exactly.
And,
But I also agree, Tracy, with the notion that the characters and even the story itself has to be allowed to flow to its own level, in its own course. And I remember very much in this story that's in the anthology we're talking about today, coming to a point in the writing process when I thought, that's not the way I mean to end it. It needs to end in a different way than I started out thinking it was going to end. I was like the character, I was myself in what is she going to do to get herself and her confidential informant out of this fix? And as she played around with it, I played around with it. And we worked, I think between the two of us, the character and me, we came out with a pretty cool solution that got everybody off the hook and perhaps not undo all the corruption that they'd been involved in, but at least they were off the hook temporarily. But that was a process that evolved, and where I had thought I was going to end is not where I ended up ending that story.
So you're sort of a pantser.
I'm sort of a pantser, for sure. No spaghetti on the wall, but yes, I'm a pantser.
Don't knock it till you try it.
I have to have some type of guardrails. Yeah. So somebody asked a question in the chat. How long does it take you to write a short story?
Ooh, how long is a string?
It depends on when the deadline is, right? Because I'm also
exactly. Yeah. Well, 3 hours before it's due.
Yeah. 3 hours.
No, I know for me, it's the ideas that I used in this story were ones that I had worked over in a different story, maybe 3 years before. And I then cut it up, reformulated it, sewed it back together, changed a lot of the circumstances, but kept some of the cool descriptions that I liked the best, kept some of the dialogue that I enjoyed. So this one was something that probably was in my mind for 4 or 5 years, not in its finished form, not to be put into this anthology, because I started writing it long before the anthology was dreamt of.
It took me about a week to write mine because I sort of wrote it in between the books. So deadline was looming. I hadn't sort of gotten my idea yet till I saw The Old Man. And so about a week, maybe start to finish, but that was sort of panic time. So it was accelerated. So I wrote really quickly because I knew I had to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I the short story that I wrote for the Low Down Dirty Votive anthology, because that was like both procrastinating and life events. I worked that in a weekend because Misty was like, "Oh, Faye, we can give you," and it was a huge life event. It was my I lost my stepmom unexpectedly. Kind of expectedly, but you can never expect those things. And Misty was like, well, we'll give you a little longer. And I'm like, no, I'm going to turn mine in when everybody else turns theirs in. I want to be treated the same as everybody else. So, that I may be a Capricorn. I don't know what that is. That's just a thing that I have. That's not very healthy. But anyway, after we got everything taken care of for her, then I just spent that weekend just writing that short story. And it was good. I mean, I liked it. I liked what I came up with. I was surprised as heck that I was able to do it. And, you start off with that blank page, and I usually write on scratch paper. So I'll take a novel or something that I've printed out, and I'll X out the front, the letters on the front, whatever on the front, and then I'll write on the back of that paper. So I was staring at that blank page, just like in a total panic, but it was the Halloween weekend that I was able to finish that. The other thing is that Lietta, I think, asked, wait, have you guys always been into crime and mystery, or even as a young reader?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I started reading, I don't know when I started reading, but I know that I always enjoyed mysteries, short stories. Sherlock Holmes was for many years and still is the books, the stories that I go back to. At least once a year, I try to read many of the Sherlock Holmes stories. When I was in grade school, and then certainly by middle school, I was reading Agatha Christie, but also some of the British tradition, the most traditional of the British lady crime writers, Marjorie Allingham, Dorothy L. Sayers, P.D. James a little bit later by high school. So I was always very involved. And a high school friend recently told me that she remembered me in high school reading a mystery story from the back forward. She said it would drive her crazy. I don't remember this, but she said that what I did was, get the book out of the library, read it, start reading the end. And she asked me, challenged me, why are you doing this? This is horrible. And I said, because I want to know how she wrote the story. And so I guess I was always meant to be a mystery writer.
What about you, Tracy?
Sort of the same thing. I started sort of with Nancy Drew books, Hardy Boys, right? That sort of segued into Agatha Christie, and I read all of those. And then I sort of got to that sort of period, that early 80s, when this great wave of female crime writers sort of came out. Sue Grafton, Sarah Paretsky, Valerie Wilson Wesley around the 90s, Eleanor Taylor Bland, all of those wonderful female crime writers. So I was really into that. And that sort of hit me right at the same spot where I was starting to seriously sit down and sort of try to write something of my own. So I sort of had those as an example and something to aspire to. But it was always mysteries. It was always dead bodies and puzzles, and all the other stuff didn't interest me at all. It was all about the crime. So, I guess crime writers are born, not made. At least I sort of would like to think so. And that's just sort of our sweet spot.
Yeah, I had a love for literature and writing very, very early on. I came from a family of writers. My dad was, he wrote poems and had them self-published. And then I also had an aunt that, that's what he said, and was that California, Louisiana, an aunt who wrote, was it an aunt or aunt? She wrote books and she wrote a book called It's Good to Be Black in 1954, which I thought was very brave of her. And then another uncle who wrote for Gunsmoke and that. So I came from a family of writers, and my mom was scared to death when I told her that I wanted to be a writer, because what she did, she looked at me and go, "Fool, writers don't make no money." She was like, "Do something else." And she says, "What?" And then even, I kind of laugh and I say that even my home ec teacher, you take home economics, I told her I wanted to be a writer, and she looked at me and said, "What else do you like to do?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know, push buttons." And so I went into the IT. I'm a computer geek. But anyway, so I've always loved literature. It's usually, we kind of grew up with the poems in the Harlem Renaissance and all of that. And I started, watching TV. I didn't have a very happy childhood, so I did a lot of escape in TV, and I was just appalled at not seeing anyone that looked like me. Lieutenant Uhura on Star Trek, I was just mad at the way they treated her. And then, of course I watched Bewitched, and I was mad at the way she was treated as a woman. What do you mean she can't use her magic? I mean, come give me a break. And so I would just make up little stories in my head, little alternate stories about Uhura being the star of the show and Sam Bewitched being the star. And I just created this whole little fantasy world. And ever since then, I've been compelled to write. So it's like my start.
I wanted to ask about, since you touched on that, Faye, about focusing, as so many of our stories have, on Black characters, on exploring African-American experiences, contemporary experiences, sometimes historical experiences. Can you talk a little bit about how that plays into the crime genre in particular through yours, not only the stories, but also your novels.
Yeah, that is interesting to me. And there's always this conversation about, if you're a Black writer, do you need to focus on an African American milieu? I mean, is that what you need to write about, African American characters and predominantly Black settings? And I think that's all bullshit. I mean, I think that it's depend on what characters that you want to write, what story you're trying to tell. If you're trying to tell a realistic story, you know, it's diverse. I mean, there's all kinds of people in that story. And I think it's incumbent upon you as a writer, if you're trying to tell a contemporary realistic story, to include all flavors of those characters in your books. I mean, back up. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do if you're a writer, but I think if you want to be read I think you just got to be realistic. But I also think that you write anything you want, right? You write anything that moves you. And I also like to think, as an English major, English literature major, and to having really studied critical race theory, not all this stuff people are talking about in the news, because they have to read a speech by Malcolm X and they feel bad. But even if you don't write about it, what you say and in the subtext and how you feel, people are going to get that. That's going to come out. That's going to be there in the subtext. You're going to be able to kind of see that. And I'll just say one more thing and then I'll shut my mouth. So you remember they call them the white savior movies. So they'll have this movie and then it'll be like all Black cast and Black story. And all of a sudden this white savior will come up and save everybody and save the day. Well, I'm sure the people that sat down and wrote those screenplays didn't say, I'm going to write about a white person saving the day for this group of Black people, right? But because of where they're from, how they see the world, how they engage with the world, that's the story that came out. So I think that even when you're not writing about it, you're writing about it in a way. So, what do you think, Tracy?
I think all that's true. When I started seriously writing about this character, I very specifically wanted her to be African American and female. I had that before I had anything else, because I wanted to see myself on the page. I enjoyed these mysteries, these series that were written by these wonderful writers, but I was not in there. It became very clear that I was not in there. And I figured I could sort of write a hero of my own, a main character that was just as smart, just as accomplished, just as capable as these other people. And that was my main focus when I started. And then it was just a matter of sort of putting that point of view, that worldview on the page. This character is a private investigator. She does not go out of her house in the morning and say, I'm going to be Black today. She is just who she is. This is what she does. This is where she's coming from. This is where she originated from. This is her viewpoint. This is how she looks at the world. And then the case is in front of her and she has to deal with that. But the interesting thing about this for me is sort of showing readers or presenting to readers this alternate perspective. It's not something that I hit over the head. This is not something that I preach about, but she is going through the world in her own specificity. She's not anybody else but herself. This is a background that she's dealing with. This is what she sees. And this is how she sort of deals with the bureaucracies around her, the police department, the municipal organizations that she has to come up against in the sort of course of doing her work. They see her in a certain way. She does not sort of present herself that way. She's just presenting herself as an investigator trying to solve a problem. But when they look at her, they see a Black woman, and then she has to deal with whatever comes. So it's interesting to sort of play with that in the context of crime fiction, in the context of PI client sort of a dynamic. So yeah, that's what my motivation is. That's what I'm doing. And I'm getting kind of good at it. So I hope readers enjoy it.
Yeah.
I found very much agreeing absolutely with what both of you are saying. I found that when I created the setting for my PI series, I found it very easy to want to create a world that was largely Black, set in Harlem. I did that very much on purpose because I didn't see the characters spending a lot of time talking about their Blackness.
Right.
They were Black. As Tracy said, they get up in the morning, they go out not being Black, they go out into the world hoping to solve some little tensions and disturbances in their neighborhood. This is something that I wanted to focus on was the background tension, of course, is that most of the people in the neighborhood that is very distressed and pressed do not want to bring their problems to the police. Sometimes they have issues and situations that fall below the radar of the police, and the police wouldn't bother with them anyway. And so they come to the little detective agency that I invented. In other cases, perhaps the crimes that occur might have risen to the level of calling for police or official intervention, but people don't want to. I don't go into great philosophical discussions about police community tensions or policing issues in the Black community, because that I don't think is the way people talk from day to day. But it's simply a given that the choice, if given one, is to go to this small neighborhood detective agency that I made up and to throw your problems and your concerns into the hands of some detectives who look like you.
Exactly.
And who come from your community. So that was sort of the basis for how I then developed my PI series.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of, and I know Morrison didn't write crime fiction, though I think Beloved is a crime novel, but centers around a murder. But it's like writing about the Black community, the Black community in relation to another community, right? With that gay, all that, yeah. So.
Yeah, and I also wanted to underline that the African American or the Black community was diverse in and of itself. So I liked being able to bring into my novels the immigrant African experience, the fact that there are Chinese Americans who own shops, and there are Latinos who operate shops and also operate other less noble enterprises in the neighborhood, that there is a variety within the community. There's a variety of religious experiences, there's a variety of language experiences, of educational background, of economic background. All of that is found within the community. You can go the entire book without speaking to or about a white person and have a completely diverse and vibrant experience in the fictional world that I work in.
I think that's wonderful. Yeah, that's great.
I thought we might want to talk a little bit about Crime Writers of Color, which is sort of the organization which underpinned our book, Midnight Hour, and enabled us to get to the point where we could have a collection, an anthology like Midnight Hour. Who wants to give a thumbnail or a long nail description of Crime Writers of Color?
Hey, Faye.
Me?
Hey.
No. Tracy, you've been a member way much longer than I have, right?
Probably. I think we sort of started with maybe 5 or 6 people, and then it's now over 300, which is fantastic. We've got writers of every hue and cry, and everybody writes different things, which is delicious. We've got really noir and cozies and all kinds of things, and it's mostly just for support and commiseration and attaboys and kicks in the pants, and we're just there sort of as a family. Supporting each other. So I think it's absolutely wonderful for all of us to sort of just have that group, to have that support, because publishing is a tough business. A lot of rejections, a lot of setbacks. You can write for years and never get anywhere. You can write for 2 weeks and get a, so it's capricious. And just to have that support and that family and that foundation, it's just a sort of a wonderful thing.
Yeah. And then I think it was founded by Walter Mosley, Gigi Paddington,
And Kelly Garrett, yeah.
and Kelly Garrett.
Kelly Garrett.
Kind of came together and it just grew. And I was invited by Rachel Housel Hall. When I first got back into the writing, she invited me to join the community. And I think just like you said, and just, being able to network and to have conversations with other people who understand your own experience, your experiences in publishing. So you don't think that it's a one-off, right? I must be an anomaly. And, people say, no, that happens, and kind of help validate your experiences and this very tough business.
I think one of the wonderful things about Crime Writers of Color, a couple of things. One, I would definitely point everybody to the fabulous website for Crime Writers of Color, and particularly the books section. It's a marvelous resource. Marla Bradeen put together and maintains the book page for that website, and you can search it any way from Sunday. You can search that website by author name, you can search by genre, so that you can find traditional mysteries, you can find private eye mysteries. If you're really into cozy mysteries, you can search by ethnic group. And so if you're interested in the Latino or Latinx writers, you can type that in and find dozens and dozens of examples. Oh, look who's come. Frankie. So I would say that that it's a great resource for anyone who wants to read widely and deeply in the crime genre. There's historical. You can find wonderful books in the historical field. And I think it's a great place to go. I think the other thing that's really been important to me about Crime Writers of Color is the support that we give each other. The as you said, the attaboy, the attagirl, the cheerleading that is so important, because writing is often a solitary activity, and it's great to be able to share successes and to share setbacks. It's great to be able to celebrate with someone when a book is released into the world and celebrate that book birthday. It's great to celebrate when someone gets an agent, or someone gets a great movie or television contract, Tracy, or when other kinds of really wonderful or publishes in a short story or gets awards. All of these things that happen in the course of a writing journey, to be able to celebrate them among people who are really quite selfless, I have to say, really quite supportive, and who seem, and I do believe have, each other's best interests at heart. We have each other's backs.
Mm-hmm.
Is Frankie coming to us? She seems like she is, but she's muted.
Muted, Frankie.
Yeah, sorry, I had a dog thing going on. My dog went in for vaccination yesterday and got 2 shots, and I was out trying to cope with him because he's been sleeping a lot. So I was trying to get him settled.
Oh, well, we're glad to see you. Thank you. Introduce yourself a little bit to the group, Frankie.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I'm Frankie Bailey, and I'm a professor at University at Albany, a criminologist, and I have a mystery series featuring crime historian Lizzie Stuart and 2 police procedurals set in Albany in what is now an alternate universe. And I'm working on a 1939 historical thriller. And I do research on crime and detective fiction as well as write it. So,
and your story in the Midnight Hour anthology is?
Yeah, I'm trying to, what is the name of it? Oh, Nighthawks.
Right.
Inspired by the painting.
Yes. Very good. Well, we're so glad you were able to join us. We've been talking about any number of things here. what's our next question? We just got finished talking about, and you might want to comment on Crime Writers of Color as an organization, as a gathering, as a group.
Yeah, I was really excited when it was started because I remember Eleanor Taylor Bland, and she was always trying to bring together the diverse groups of crime writers, and so this is just sort of her dream realized in the sense that we're all coming together in that forum.
Exactly. Another question. Faye, you have a question for all of us?
I mean, what are you guys working on? What are you working on next? Do you plan to continue? Well, I have a question. I'm going to back up. What advice would you have for someone who wants to write and kind of get into the business? My advice was, fool, you're not going to make any money doing that. No. Like my mother told me, my mama said, fool, you're not going to make any money. But no, but yeah, what advice would you?
My advice would be to just write. You don't know what you have until you start. And that's probably the hardest part of it, starting, because you're going to try to convince yourself that you don't have what it takes. You couldn't possibly write a book. It's too long. It's too difficult. Just write. If you've got an idea, put it down on paper, keep going. It's a tough road, a long road, and you have to sort of stick with it. You have to sort of focus and commit to it and just write.
I would say join a group of, oh my gosh, sorry, my dog has the pen. Put it down.
Live TV.
I agree. I think it's just to write, just to get started writing, and do everything you can to kill that inner critic, and just put down your words, right? Right, like the commercial. So you
just do it, right?
Just do it.
Right, just do it. I also think to meet and get to know other writers, whether that's through your local library, maybe there's a club that you could join at your local library. I think it's good to test out your writing. I think at some point, it's not enough, frankly, to just simply write for yourself. I mean, maybe that's your only goal and that's good, but I think there's a difference between writing for yourself and publishing. And publishing, in the broadest sense, means putting it out there in the world for others, not necessarily your blood relatives, to read and to react to. And I think you learn a lot through that interaction, whether it's in a critique group. It can be very informal. It doesn't have to be some kind of highly structured gathering of deeply committed writers. It can just be people who are readers, who like to read and who like to read in your genre and who want to read more. And they will give you from their time and from their heart their insights into what you've put on paper. And I think that's an important aspect of the writing process, is getting that feedback.
I think that's a good point too. It also sort of teaches you not to be too precious about your words, because you sort of have a tendency to sort of grip onto them and you don't want to change anything because they mean so much to you. I think getting that feedback sort of gives you an opportunity to sort of step back and look at what you've written objectively as a writer of something that might be marketable. So you're sort of looking at those words, not so precious, easily changed if you sort of give yourself over to that. And I think you sort of get that through the feedback. So you sort of let the writing go, you put it as much as you can into it, and then let it go and put it out there, and then see what comes back and see what you have to sort of massage and change.
And I think,
Oh, just real quick, I think study your craft. I mean, and then find your heroes and read everything you get your hands on. When I first started writing, I was like that. I thought everything I wrote was too precious. And I thought I don't need to study my craft because I was brainwashed into thinking that it came from an innate talent and no one can learn writing and that type of thing. So study your craft, read, and practice.
And I would say also study other arts. Faye, you were mentioning poetry, you were mentioning sculpture, I think film, I think television. I find that I get a lot for my writing from other media that are not the written word, but that I will get vocabulary, I will get images, I will get sensations from a movie, from a poem, from a magazine article, from a newspaper article, and it could be from almost anywhere. And I think opening yourself to reading, yes, deeply into all the areas and genres that you enjoy, but going beyond. Maybe it's sculpture, maybe it's going to a museum and looking at the latest photography exhibit on display in your town. I think those are, to me anyways, important sources of inspiration, but actually literally of language.
Yeah.
You remind me of one of my short stories. I've sold 2 short stories to Ellery Queen, but one was inspired because I was looking at fashion design. I'm working in a nonfiction book about dress and appearance, and I found this black velvet evening coat from the 1930s, and that became the inspiration for the short story that I did. But I always, music, I've used titles. Kenny Rogers' Title was an inspiration for the first book, first short story I had in Eleanor Taylor Bland's Anthology. So yeah, I agree with that completely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it all blends in your head.
It does.
It's all material.
Yeah, it's all material.
Does anyone from the audiences have questions that we haven't covered that maybe give them 5 or some time to ask questions of us?
Mm-hmm.
CJ asked, how did you get involved with this anthology, and did you write specifically for it? And did we answer that question? And was that a different kind of pressure from your other stories and books? You may have.
Well, I think we ought to give complete credit to the one who's not here, Abby Vandiver, who put together this anthology. Abby had the idea. Well, they had the idea for it and came to us in Crime Writers of Color and put out the call and asked if there were people who were interested, and there were plenty. And when she had a goodly number, she went to she put the proposal out to a variety of publishers to test the waters, to see if there were people who might be interested in such a thing. And I think we formed a little Facebook group, and we intercommunicated. It was I thought it was interesting. It was a very communal sort of experience, in contrast to the being in your own little narrow hovel with your narrow desk and writing the actual story. The process, even we went through the process of coming up with theme, with coming up with a title for the book. Mm-hmm. We discussed the contract with the publisher once one had been identified. We did all that collectively. It came very naturally. I mean, I think back on it and I'm thinking, that's really weird, but it actually came very smoothly and very naturally, at least to my feeling, it was.
Yeah.
Then Abby gave us the deadlines. That's right.
Yeah.
Abby gave us the deadlines and gave us the word length and said, turn it in by this date with this link. And we went on.
It was a wonderful experiment to me. I know that's the second time I used that word. I hope the word police don't come for me, but it was it's like an experiment because, and the book is doing so well, the communal way that we did it, that you were talking about, and it's doing great. So that was just the way, several nominated stories, including Tracy's in there, and it's getting wide recognition. And I don't know. It's like that's one of the things that I'm really proud of, is how well the book is doing. So, and the way it came about, right? How it came. Right. Yeah.
Reviewed in the New York Times, in the column on crime fiction in the New York Times. We even worked on the cover together, as I recall. We collectively thought about and came up with imagery for the, in addition to the title of the anthology, we came up with the cover imagery for it. So we were on all fronts at all aspects. Yeah. And then at some point, didn't Abby send us, once the publisher had put together the galleys, she sent them back to us and said, well, obviously first read your own story. make sure that your own story is the way it ought to be and that there are no missteps or typos. But she said, if you have the time, please read any others, because we want as many eyes as possible on the other stories, catching the typos, catching the dropped lines or the missed punctuation. So again, a very collective effort to polish the book as it got to its later stages.
And then like I said, that's something that's blown me away. That the way that it turned out to be successful. So we have the second question about research. And it is like, do you do extensive research into the particular crime that you write about? And if so, how do you do this? And I think a writer will tell you, they hope that the FBI never looks at their search history. I'm gonna just
I always go back and clean mine up after I finish.
Clear the cache out.
I'm not kidding. Seriously, I do.
I do. Yeah.
Extensive. How extensive is extensive for you? How far do you go down the rabbit hole?
I make sure that the crime, like for example, if I'm in this book, there's a murder weapon that I can't talk. The next book that's coming out in June 2022, there's this kind of weird murder weapon. And when I'm doing that, I make sure I have 3 or 4 corroborating sources. And if I get like 3 or 4 corroborating sources, then I stop, because you can go down that rabbit hole and never come back up to write. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of my rule when I'm doing research like that. But I don't want to take what people call creative license so much that people that are familiar with those types of weapons can say, you just did that it's just totally wrong and not realistic. I just want to have some similar, what is that, verisimilitude? I mean, a verisimilitude or whatever, but I want to have a little bit of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I teach a course on historical research, so I spend almost every day doing research. And so the rabbit hole is a problem for me, but then I have the other part that, because I'm a criminologist, I have all that exposure to real life crime. And so I'm inspired by those crimes, and then I plug them into whatever I'm doing. But yeah, I feel really responsible for doing it right and making sure what I do is correct, because I do research for a living.
Mm-hmm.
I remember in one of the books, the previous books that I wrote, I based the sort of core plot or the core heist that was going on, financial heist, on an actual newspaper article that I pulled out of the New York Times. Don't you know, that was the one part that was challenged by a reader friend. She said, it doesn't seem realistic that they would do this and that. And I'm going, that's the one part that I didn't make up. The whole rest of it, I made up. Every page except for that crime.
Yeah,
no, that was unrealistic.
So I'm also noticing, I'm also noticing there was something on Twitter about that the other day, about a reader challenging something about the way they do bachelor's and master's degree in Louisiana in certain fields. Yeah, but the reader was wrong and the author was right. But yeah, but we're losing folks. People are dropping off. So as they drop off, can we talk about our book recommendations? Do you have any book recommendations?
I recently read, it's getting a lot of publicity anyway, but I'm going to give a little more, Secret Identity by Alex Segura. I think was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. It's a comic book noir set in the 1970s in New York City as a young woman attempts to work her way into the comic book writing field. It's great.
Mm-hmm. Tracy?
And I'm reading Delia's book right now, Murder Take Two. I love PI fiction, and Brooke, her PI, is one of my all-time favorites. I love the writing, just the writing style is wonderful. Whenever she releases a book, that's the first thing I have to read. So that's what I'm reading right now, along with a couple of other things, but that's right at the top. And I'm halfway through, and I think I know what's going on, but she always fools me. But I would recommend Delia's book, any one of them, just pick one. You won't regret it.
Thank you.
Actually, I'm reading Tracy's book right now, so
What?
at the beginning, so I can't, but it looks like it's going to be great, Tracy.
Yeah, and
Fingers
I'm
crossed.
Your most recent book.
Oh, Runner.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm also reading Tracy's Cast Rain series, and I'm loving every minute of it, the characterizations and everything. But I'm kind of like, I'll read 2 or 3 books at a time. But I've also read recommendations. Bath House by P.J. Vernon is really, really good.
Yes, yes.
I love that book. And then another one was The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. They won the Pulitzer a couple of years back, but I just read it. And the interesting thing about that book, to me, is that if you have a good story to tell, just tell that he's very plain language. There's not a lot of lyricism, or it's almost like don't kill me, Tracy. It's almost like journalistic language, but the story is just so good that I really like that book. And then the latest book I just read was Under the Color of Law. It's a Trevor Finnegan police procedural set in LA. And I'm cheating because I had to pull up all my books. I just did. I want to let you guys know that I've been reading and love and stuff. But that one was an interesting read about to see how the police in LA how a Black officer deals with police corruption and thereby may have become corrupted and stuff. So that kind of stuff, I don't want to give too much away, but that was an interesting read as well. So.
I was going to mention also These Toxic Things by Rachel Housel Hall.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful twisty story. And if you really want to go down the private investigator route, anything by Cheryl A. Head.
Yes.
She has a wonderful series set in Detroit with a Black female private eye who's great.
Great. Well, I think we're almost to 7:15. So I think, and like I said, we're losing folks. It was I think about 10 people have dropped off. So there you go. I see Lisa. Hi.
Hi. Oh my gosh, that was so good. And like I said, library friends out there, we tried to keep up with those book lists. I started losing the links though as you went, but I will add them to the doc, which is right here. Has all the book, not all the books, because there was a rapid fire book talk there, and links to our presenters. You can get all these books at SFPL or your favorite library or favorite bookstore. Also, they talked about many folks that have been at SFPL. So we've been doing these panels for a while now, and it's just such an amazing to see like this community of crime writers, like gracing the library community. So we know we don't pay you enough. We want to put like lots of zeros after what your honorarium is. But thank you so much for speaking to our library community. I know they love it. And thank you for being part of our more than a month celebration. And you're all brilliant. I said you were all brilliant, and it's true. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right, let's do a wave. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.